Now we're supposed to have this hearing, and in the meantime, the alleged gang members in question are already in El Salvador, right? So what's your big picture view on this? You pick up a little bit on what Ambassador Bolton is saying, but also on the main back and forth that we've been hearing about throughout the last couple of days.
Sure. Well, this is a preview of battles to come. The Trump administration has made no secret that it intends to wield very aggressively its authority under the immigration laws to remove individuals from the United States. And I think inevitably, this is going to cause a lot of friction, to say the least, with judges who typically like to have a say in the process and make sure they approve any removals before they occur. So I think what's going to unfold, and is in fact unfolding right now across town, is really a harbinger of things to come, when we're going to see a president wielding immigration law very aggressively, and we're going to see judges kind of kicking the tires and in some cases pushing back a bit.
So what happened, for people who aren't following it over the weekend, first of all, let me start on Friday. We covered the president's speech from the Department of Justice on Friday. And I remember going in, we thought, well, is he going to talk about this this law that they ended up using? And he didn't. And he ended up apparently signing an executive order related to it on Friday night, but nobody really knew about it. And then if you go to the tablet, we can bring up this timeline. Then on Saturday, things started to happen, and happen fast, right? So at 4:20 p.m., see the top, Trump invokes the proclamation in question, and then they start loading people on flights from Texas, a couple of flights. The judge gets wind of it by now and verbally blocks the order, enters it into the docket a little before 7:30. But by that time, you have flights moving. A third one departs after that. Trump administration appeals, and then it goes on with the flight landing just after midnight, and you see the rest of it there, a reaction from El Salvador and Secretary Rubio saying that it was, quote-unquote, gang members that were expelled. But, Tom, this moved really fast, right? And to your point about precedent in the future, it's, it looks, to a layperson like, hey, well, they're trying to pull a fast one, right? That's the question here. So then what about if they get ruled against today again? Then what?
Well, look, the first thing I'll say is that timeline really is extraordinary. And it really illustrates how the White House and the executive branch can move very quickly, and it can be hard for judges to keep up. I mean, what we saw unfolding there is remarkable. Literally, while lawyers were arguing in court about whether these removals were unlawful, planes were taking off, flying, and apparently landing in El Salvador with the people who are subject of the ongoing hearing in court. Now, as far as what the judge can do at this point, I think his authority is probably even more limited than it was over the weekend, now that these individuals have been removed from the country. I think what the judge is going to focus on today is whether or not there was a willful violation of his order to turn the plane around. The administration says, number one, the judge just has absolutely no authority in this area. This hearing shouldn't even happen. And number two, they say they did not intentionally defy the court order.
Right.
We'll see what the judge says, but it's going to be some interesting fireworks going on down the street.
Yeah, the arguments seem to be, as I was in, international waters, essentially, that seems debatable depending on which plane you're talking about. And then, like, the president of El Salvador said something like, oh, too late, they're already here. And that's part of this as well, is that they are already there, right? So that goes to your point earlier, is that we're trying to figure out what's going to be done in the future and trying to get out ahead of this. So how does the judge tackle this? So they'll look at the facts on it, right? So you mentioned earlier, for example, due process. So talk about that. What's the law here for someone here illegally, alleged to be a member of a gang? Now, whether that's proven or not, I guess is another question. But let's just say, for argument's sake, the administration says, all right, they are proven gang members. They've committed crimes. They're here illegally. Due process. What does it say?
Sure. Well, in normal times and under normal circumstances, before you could remove someone like that, there would be some sort of hearing, typically before an immigration judge, where people would look at the evidence, they'd look at the record, there would be a court hearing. What's happening now is different. The president has invoked the Alien Enemies Act. This is a statute that hasn't been used since World War II. Historically, it's been used in times of actual war or invasion in the United States. This statute, when you remove aliens under this statute, there really ain't a lot of due process. The president basically can just take them out of the country. So what's going to be invoked here, the question here, is whether the president properly invoked his authority under that old law. And your legal opinion on that? Well, I think the judge is not going to like being told he doesn't have a say in the process. But look, on the president's side of things, there's not a lot of court precedent out here. The statute hasn't been used in decades, so it's not like the White House, or not like the opponents have anything they can point to directly. Well, is Ambassador Bolton right? You get a lot of leeway here if you do use national security as your argument, as they are? Yeah, you definitely get more leeway. The question, though, is whether you basically get total leeway. And I think that's where the judge is going to push back and say, I'm not trying to second guess White House decisions. I'm not trying to micromanage immigration enforcement, but I have a role to play in this process, and I didn't get to play that role here. I think that's what's on his mind.
Interesting. Thanks so much for watching. Just go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.